Hey, this is Jules Taylor, host of No Easy Answers. I just wanted to thank everyone for their continued support. Please like and subscribe to this podcast, tell your friends, and if you haven't already become a supporter, please consider supporting the podcast by heading to www.anchor.fm/No Easy Answers and click on the support button. We couldn't do it without you. Here's episode 8 in its entirety.
I'm so happy that you've never had to experience that. But for those of us who have, that shit is real.
Today is Saturday, October 17th. The year is 2020. This is No Easy Answers, and I am your host, Jules Taylor. Today, like all days, I have no easy answers for you. So today on the show, I'm talking with Samuel Thomas, and Sam is one of my best friends, and he and I are talking about being biracial in America. This is part 2 of that conversation. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, that's okay. You can listen to part 2 on its own. They're both released on the same day, so feel free to go back to episode 7 if you'd like to catch the first half of this conversation. This is the second part of a 2-part series featuring Samuel Thomas. Before we took a break, we were talking, and we kind of arrived at the space where we were examining, like, what is white culture, and we had spoke about briefly, like, Eldridge Cleaver, and Eldridge, man, Soul on Ice was like, to me, it was like obviously the guy took a lot of inspiration from James Baldwin, as a lot of authors did at that point, and but he was like James Baldwin with like grit to me, The prose of James is really quite, it's just remarkable and beautiful. And Eldridge was beautiful in the same, but in an uglier way, I think,
Very raw.
Very raw. Yeah. And I was just reminded when you asked, like, what is white culture? And when we arrived at that space for that in our conversation, it was like, I'm reminded of that quote where he says, and I'll just quote this. He's like, "What has suddenly happened is that the white race has lost its heroes. Worse, its heroes have been revealed as villains, and its greatest heroes, the arch-villains. They recoil in shame from the spectacle of cowboys and pioneers, their heroic forefathers whose exploits filled earlier generations with pride. Even Winston Churchill, who is looked upon by older whites as perhaps the greatest hero of the 20th century, even he, because of the system in which he was a creature of and served, is an arch-villain in the eyes of the young white rebels." So, like, and I want to be clear that there's plenty of things in, like, Irish history to be proud of, right? Or, things like French history or what have you, but not white history is this. In the contemporary sense, man, I think it largely is, you can't just, it's really difficult to look back and be like, remember that time when, like, we didn't want to free the slaves and we got our ass beat, by the Union, or remember that, our ancestors conquered this land, it's hard to excuse those things with, in a contemporary sense, it's like, I don't think that whiteness has a history to look back on that's fond, and it's hard for them to admit that their history to look back on is just committing atrocities in a lot of ways, and I guess I want to phrase this also with, like, there are authors out there like Ibram Kendi and Robin DiAngelo recently, right? Ibram wrote How to Be an Anti-Racist, and Robin DiAngelo, a white woman, wrote White Fragility. And I get the sense that, like, for non-Black Americans, this is a learning exercise. Like, this is something that they're learning about, which is opening their eyes, but it's nothing more than a learning experience because they can't have the actual experiential experience, So I wonder, like, it was this like when you started reading Black authors as a child, was that something that, like, your mother or your father imparted onto you? Was it something you discovered? Was it like a scholastic thing? And within the context of like what is white culture, if you compare those things together, I mean, I don't know. I'll just turn it over to you in that respect.
So I would say scholastically, I got a lot of knowledge because my part of Black culture is very unique in the sense that my father on my my father is first generation American. They're from he's from the West Indies, so he and my grandmother, like, they have a unique experience to the islands of the Caribbean.
Right.
So like I got a lot of historical knowledge that's very specific to their experience, like very specific. So when I think about Black authors, there's one that comes to mind as like the first book that I read that I really connected to was Chinua Achebe, Things Fall Apart.
Wow.
And I think I must have been like 13 at the time, 12 or 13 at the time. And just kind of understanding the Black experience, even from that angle, and then understanding what my immediate family went through, to where it's like a lot of people have to experience a lot of that, through books and through the experiences of others. I've had that experience through my own family, and then being able to incorporate my own experience because I've lived it. I talked to my to my mother-in-law, who's a staunch Republican, and I love her to death.
Oh.
But she said something, and I said, we were talking about something the other day, and I was like, everywhere that I've lived, every single place that I've lived, I've experienced some sort of racism, and I've looked for racism, making sure that like a certain place has a good enough diversity to where we're not going to be looked at. Because my wife being white, me being Black, and we have a biracial son who he's pretty light, because he's I'm half, so he looks very white, and his mother's genes are very dominant, in him.
Right.
So that being said, like, she was like, well, where you look for racism, you'll find it. And I said, and I wanted to say, you're trying to tell me as a white person what I experienced,
right,
as being Black. Like, no matter what you do, no matter how many things you've seen, you don't know. You can never know. You can't. No matter the amount of books you can empathize.
Right.
But you don't know. It's like me being a male and being like, hey, you shouldn't put the tampon like that. You should put the tampon this way. Like, I've seen a bunch of women put in tampons before.
Right.
So therefore, I'm uniquely qualified to answer that question and be completely right. No, I'm not a fucking woman. Only a fucking woman can understand how that shit works. Really understand how that shit works and how it feels.
Right.
You can have the exterior view. So like when I try to impart any sort of my own experience to other people, it's very it's very taxing when I my white friends and people that have experienced or seen it can really, like, they can grasp up into a point, and then there's that cutoff. There's that hard cutoff. And then it's like, only somebody who's Black can really understand that. Like I'm sorry, like, Mexican food is made best by Mexicans, bro. It's just facts. Like, it's facts. It's factual things. It's part of the culture, and the part of the Black culture and it's really sad. Part of the Black culture is dealing with that. That is part of our culture.
Right.
We have been brought up. I was talking to my wife about this today. Um, I remember getting into an argument with my dad when I was 17 or 18 years old. Um, and I was, oh no, I was 18. I was coming back. My mom was on the phone with him. And I was coming back from going somewhere and I'd forgotten my ID. So I walk in the house and she's like, "Oh, your father's on the phone. He wants to talk to you." I'm like, "All right." So I get on the phone and I start talking to him. And he's like, "Oh, I thought you were running out to the bank." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, no, I forgot my ID and I drove and I got there." And I'm like, "Oh, shit, I didn't have it." So I had to come back and grab it so I can go to the bank and do things. And my dad got really fucking angry.
Mm.
And he's like, "You cannot leave the house without having your ID. What the fuck are you thinking?" Da 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 da. And like just like going on, and I didn't understand it. I was like, why are you getting so upset? Why are you like you're lashing out at me?
Right.
And now I understand it, and I do the same thing to my son.
Mm.
The Black experience in that sense is very unique and very. He knows that if I get pulled over and being a young Black male in a
Yeah.
predominantly white area,
Yeah. Damn,
that's
dude.
a fucking problem.
Damn.
That's a problem. I've been pulled over before many times just because I was Black.
Right.
With my wife. My wife, she remembers this experience vividly. We were living in Montauk at the where we were staying at my father-in-law. We were staying at his house in Sag Harbor in New York, and we were coming back from Montauk because we both worked in Montauk. She worked at a restaurant, and I was driving taxis at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So we get into her car. Now, mind you, and this is kind of a little bit of foreshadowing. I had done some work to this car, like I put new lights in and stuff like that, because in New York they're very, totally strict with inspections.
A check engine light will ruin your life, as I'm currently experiencing with my Jeep. So yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, so so I know everything was fucking legit. I make a turn, drive by, I see a cop pass me. My wife is laying flat in the car. She had a rough night, so she pulled the thing back and she's laying flat. We make a right. We're going down the road. Boop, lights go on.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't say anything at first because I'm like, all right, I got to get prepared. She's like, "Why are you stopping?" I'm like, "We're getting pulled over."
Yeah.
Cop by that point is already up to the window.
Yeah.
And sees her, and his like automatically he's like, didn't ask for my license, didn't ask for my registration. He goes, "Your light's out." And I go, "Well, do you mind if I get out the car and look?" No. It looks like it's back on now, but it was out. I'm like, shit. So is there any issue? No. Go about your business. Oh, okay, thanks. Huh. Now, if I had been alone, I know for a fact that experience would have been different.
Right.
That experience would have been vastly different, as it has been before. Another experience, and I don't know if you remember this. I know we were living at Cahal.
Oh, you're on Cahal Street. Yeah. Cahal Avenue.
Cahal Avenue. Cahal Avenue. 1127 Cahal Avenue in Nashville.
That's what it is, man. That's the house, man.
So I got the Civic. It was the 03 Civic. And I had temporary tags like you get in Tennessee. You get a temp tag.
Yeah.
So I got the temp tag, and I'm going up to the liquor store a little further down on Gallatin. Mm-hmm. I make the right. I stop at Crystal's first and get some sliders. let me throw that first. I stop at Crystal's and get some sliders because they were terrible. But I hadn't started drinking yet. Nothing. Nothing completely sober.
Right.
Everything's legit. Insurance is legit. Everything's legit on the car. I get pulled over. Why am I getting pulled over? You were going 42 and a 40.
Oh, what? Shit. Wow.
What? 42 and a 40? What?
Wow.
Like, you're pulling me over for 42 and a 40? You're pulling me over because I'm Black in a Black neighborhood with temporary tags on and a car that looked, that car was like really nice when I bought it. It was
right.
Pretty sweet car. So that's another experience where it's like, I know why you're pulling me over, like to the point where he's holding me there and he's running my shit and everything. And he's, there's one guy, he's an unmarked. So there's one guy on this side, one guy on this side, another cop car pulled up behind me. So
They
now
used to, yeah, they would have like 6 patrol cars deep when they pulled people over on Gallatin Avenue,
dude,
man.
well, you got to think Gallatin at that point in time, Gallatin now even still, especially Gallatin Dickerson, where we
Right. Oh my God, yeah.
Like it's a predominantly black area, so they and low income, and then there's this whole, we got every black guy that comes through there in a nice car with temporary tags, he's got to be doing something wrong. Yeah, no, I just worked. You remember at that time, dude, I'd work fucking 60 hours a fucking week. Like
Right.
I was always,
Yeah.
I was always fucking working. Like I it was that situation, and that's just 2 experiences that I look at and I say, at the end of my life and at this point in time, I can write a book just based on my racial injustices here in Chicago. Here in Chicago. Now, I don't live in Chicago. For people that don't know, I don't live in Chicago. I live about 30 miles outside of Chicago.
Right.
Very nice, very super nice suburban friggin' neighborhood. Like, there's farmlands that way, there's farmlands that way, there's farmlands that way. The city's that way. Like, it's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful area.
Yeah.
I am a project manager for audiovisual events, and I have been for a very long time. I went to go visit a client. When I visit clients, especially high-end clients, pharmaceutical companies, I dress in a suit and tie.
Right.
Suit and tie. I drive by the courthouse. I get pulled over. Was I speeding? No. Did I fail to signal? No. Fail to stop? No. Where are you coming from? I don't wish to discuss my day.
Yeah. Right.
Well, are you coming from the courthouse? Why would I be coming from the courthouse? Well,
Right.
You're wearing a suit. Like he said that. Well, you're wearing a suit. I'm like, well, I was actually just meeting with a client at a pharmaceutical company at a restaurant over here. Actually, with a meal that I paid for. Well, let me see your license and registration. Why am I being stopped? Why am I being detained?
Yeah.
Well, grumbling, runs my shit. Everything comes back clean. I don't do shit.
Right.
I go about my business. It's a matter of you're being checked out to make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. To me, that's not America. To me, that is you're in a subservient state. I've always felt that black people have liberty, white people have freedom. I feel that freedom is the freedom is the ability to do whatever you want, no matter what.
Right.
Liberty is you have the ability to have certain freedoms based upon the laws that are there.
There was I was thinking about this really deeply the other day, because it occurred to me, man, that like the concept that Americans have of freedom is a very negative concept. Like it's more freedom from than freedom to, so like when you look at, I guess, white culture in America, it's like freedom from over taxation, freedom from Second Amendment infringement, freedom from censorship, but it's not a whole lot of freedom too. And then this overall thought occurred to me where it was like, what does freedom mean to you, man? Does it mean you spread your wings, or does it mean you lose your chains? Because these things are not the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
that's super, dude. That's absolutely accurate, 100%.
So I can't. And the thing about it too, man, is that like, I think in my younger age, man, I know for a fact I was super fucking selfish and super driven towards my own dreams. And I, even now as like a songwriter, like I carry a lot of guilt as far as like, when I sit down to write a song, it took a hell of a lot of resources for me to be able to actually do that, for me to sit there and pick my nose and, stare out the window and maybe find some words. Maybe I don't, but I got to have food in my stomach and a roof over my head and a decent guitar that's inspiring and time for leisure in order to do that. And then it's a privilege even to step out on stage and perform. So, given that, like, going back to being selfish and being driven to get to that point, man, as a younger kid, being selfish and more for myself than being for others or for the world, there was a certain point when I guess I realized, man, that, like, nobody's free until we're all free, and my freedom is contingent and it's wrapped up in your freedom, because I am only as free as far as you are allowed to be free. Like,
Yeah.
my freedom ends where your freedom ends, and or at least my freedom is limited by your amount of freedom that you have. So, given all of that, man, I think that it's, like, I have a buddy who, I won't say his name, but he just got involved in a TV show, and he told me that basically the best part of going to this TV show during this COVID thing, they quarantine them in a hotel for, however long they do the series or what have you. So much of the crew came together and lived in this hotel together. They all got to know each other. And he said the best thing about being involved with that production was, now he has like a whole group of black friends, and he's a white dude, and he's doing what he needs to be doing right now. He's doing all the reading. Like, he's trying to become more socially conscious, and he's trying to understand this and to be sensitive towards it. And like any white guy, he's got questions and he's confused on certain things, But he, when we talked about that, he said he was like, man, black people aren't like sitting around talking about white fragility, bro. Like, black people are not sitting around discussing, like James Baldwin novels or something to that end, because it's not a fun thing to speak about, I guess, and it's your lived experience. It's something that's real to you and not real to other people.
Right.
It's so much so that they will tell you how to that white people will be so bold as to say, oh, well, if you look for racism, you find racism, like you mentioned,
Right.
Yeah. So I guess, in sort of trying to put a lid on all of this, is there anything that you, like, would want to say to white America, like, as a person with your experiences, because I mean, we all have white friends and some of them are more reachable than others, but I mean, is there any kernel of truth that you maybe have on your own that guides you or helps you, or is some truth that, like, you wish it wasn't true, or what would you say to, like, white America at this point, given your lived experience?
Well, my first and foremost comment would be to people in general. We all have vastly different experiences while we're here on Earth. Everybody's experience is unique to who they are. You can be the same race and have completely different things going in your life. One rich, one poor, one fat, one skinny, one smart, one dumb, one, you know what I mean? Like, so to comprehend completely and to completely cast aside or be able to deny someone's experience is inherently ignorant. Based upon the fact that you don't understand what goes on between the ears of another human being. No matter how hard you try, you can empathize, you can possibly, but can you really know? Absolutely not. You can't tear somebody's insides out and really understand it. You can't go into someone's brain and be like, this is what they're experiencing. So any of those things where it's like white America that, and I would say this to the people that are like, well, racism doesn't exist, it's one of the most ignorant things you could say. You can say that I'm not racist. You can sit there as a white person and say that I'm not racist and I don't think that racism is right. Yes, absolutely. Or you could say that or you could say that I am racist, whatever. But regardless of that, like you can't say to another black person, and black people can't even say to black people, because I've heard this argument, the Candace Owens argument,
Oh,
that
Jesus Christ, that girl. Yeah.
yeah, that I've never experienced racism. Well, that is amazing. That is great. That is awesome. I'm so happy that you've never had to experience that. But for those of us who have, that shit is real. That it exists. It's there. It's been in my face. People have witnessed it that have been a part of my life. My wife especially, like it does exist. To completely just be dismissive of someone else's experiences because they don't jive with your political alignment or who you think you are or who you think your people are or who you think this country is. It's imaginary goddamn lines.
Right.
It's like, my mother's a vet. My stepfather is a vet. Like, yeah, I get it. Like, nationalism, yeah, okay. Like it's bullshit. It's all
I think
bullshit, dude.
I
Like,
think a
but
lot
they're
of
like just so afraid of globalization. Fuck
right.
global. Like, we are all this. We don't. We don't belong like to a country. We belong to a planet of people. You know what I mean? Like, we
It's this
are all symbiotic,
it's this
man.
hyper individualistic sort of philosophy or hyper individualistic ideology that Americans have, where the only thing
Mine is mine.
yeah, the only thing collectively we do is like they try and corral us into voting every 4 years, and they,
Right. Yeah,
you know,
that's the big thing. It's like,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
let's
yeah,
not try to save the planet for the next generation.
right.
Let's not try to help out anybody else with taxes that we all fucking pay. Let's not try to have universal health care. Let's not try to do those things that help everyone else because it hurts me a little bit.
right. It's hyper individualism that is, and you can see this kind of emerge in whiteness when they, when they speak to your lived experience, man. Like the hyper individualistic ideology of Americans can be seen in that their lived experience is centered and everything else is, negligible. So much so that like even the lived experience of their neighbor is not something that they take it take their word on, I suppose,
Right. Yep. I'm
so much
so
so much
happy
that I see of
that you've
like
never had to experience
to
that.
talk race
But
with
for
any
those
white
of us
person
who
is really
have,
difficult.
that shit is
But
real.
so much of what I see with talking race with white people is like what I've heard called the politics of self-exoneration. It's like, I'm not racist. Oh, I have plenty of black friends, and 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 it's like, to me, it's I get it, man. Like I have no problem saying that I'm racist because I know that part of me is racist, and I acknowledge that, and I work towards ridding myself of that, and sort of ridding my social circle of those things too. So it's not, it's we don't have time for the politics of self-exoneration. It's like I have done things in the past which have probably harmed the people around me that are people of color, that are black people, and but that also goes back to this hyper individualistic thing in this entire thread through this comment where like what is white culture is not being able to admit your sins, like not being able to admit that your past is fucked up, your people committed atrocities, you're on stolen land, and you can't even it's like they're all in denial of, it's like a parent that doesn't want to admit they fucked you up,
Right.
like the steps around your trauma. It's like every time it's like confronting your abuser, and then they're like, but is there really a past? Like, did that really happen in the past?
Yeah, it's almost it's this extremely like gaslit
Yeah, man.
just extremely gaslit thing that exists. It's funny that we're having this conversation on this day
Right.
And on Columbus Day of all days to be having this type of conversation, to speaking of white culture and the atrocities committed, and one of the holidays that people are so worried about clinging on to is one of a terrible fucking human being who existed long ago, who did do
Yeah.
blatant atrocities. But no, it's okay because we get a fucking day off.
I
Yeah,
don't
it's
even
great.
think that Columbus was Italian as well. Those guys celebrate them, you know? So
Yeah. Columbus was Columbus was Italian, wasn't he?
was he
sailed for.
Italian?
He was Italian, but he sailed for Spain.
Oh, right on. Yeah. Right.
He was Italian, but he sailed for Spain.
Right.
But yeah, like it's so funny. It's this belief that because Fox News tells me that it didn't happen or it doesn't exist, and Candace Owens being black, well, if her experience is like that, then everyone's experience must be the same. It's this thing that people think that they experience the same lives on any fucking level. To me, is just absolutely fucking asinine.
And whiteness being this thing that like absorbs things too, man. Like so fucking Tucker Carlson a while back had this thing where he said tacos were American food. He was like, tacos? No, that's ours now. We have those. We make tacos in America. They're American food. It's American cuisine, is what he said. And I'm paraphrasing. He might not say exactly that, but that was the gist of it. He was like, tacos are American food. And so it got me to thinking, right? And as we're talking, it's Columbus Day in October, and Thanksgiving will be coming around the corner. And, and on Thanksgiving, there's like cornucopias and squash. And this is so ubiquitous with like this, the Pilgrims and whiteness and the Mayflower and this shit, right?
And pumpkin spice.
And pumpkin spice, right? Which is like, oh, we took these 6 or 7 different spices, not even pumpkin, like they took these 6 or 7 different spices they committed genocide for, and they mix them together, and they, it's like, hey, we had an opium war over here, we got a little bit of, Chinese 5 spice in that, we fucked up, we extracted like $50 trillion from India, but we got this chai we can put in this, you mix it all together, we call it pumpkin spice. Yeah. Anyway, but dude, like, the cornucopias and the squash and the stuff like that, man, that's ubiquitous with Thanksgiving and the Pilgrims, that's all fucking Native American food, man. That shit is more Indian or Native American than it ever was European. Just like Tucker Carlson being like, yo, tacos are American food. Like it's like this, which is kind of like how capitalism co-ops everything. It's like it capitalism takes things, absorbs it, and then sells it back to you as a commodity. It commodifies it. So does like whiteness in absorption of other things.
Right.
And then it's labeled as white. And then history is written and kind of say, no, don't pay attention to that. It's all good. And then we end up with things that seem like they're white. And it's not even, so many things like the banjo is an African instrument that made its way to the Caribbean and ended up in the Americas, but it's affiliated now and looked at as like, bluegrass and Appalachian culture and stuff, which I love. And I'm guilty of just, being that guy that loves bluegrass and roots instruments and stuff. But, it took listening to that girl, and her name escapes me right now. This woman who plays with the Carolina Chocolate Drops, she's a banjo player, but she also puts on like TED Talks, I believe, or some informative thing like that to teach the roots of the banjo. And I had no idea that was an African instrument. And so, so you look at, across the board, anything that Americans love, whether it's, and it's a lot of it, everything comes from Africa.
Yeah.
So
even the people, even the people, man, like, melanin in our skin, there was melanin that was not used or not needed after people had migrated from Africa to Scandinavian countries, European countries. It's more cloudy. It's everybody came from Africa. Everybody, like that's not something like. It's called fucking science. It's like, come on.
And I love it when they're like, no, it's the out of Asia theory that was proven.
Jesus is white. Nah, sorry, bro. It says multiple times in the Bible. I've never seen a nappy-headed white person that wasn't Jewish. And then I've never seen bronze being described unless you're talking about Trump with his spray tanner for a white person.
Right. Well, which was speaking of like Jesus being white. That's an interesting kind of inroad there because and I'll ask you like, are you spiritual at all?
I am spiritual, but I am not religious. I think the Bible is a piece of literature to which people have, for some reason, think that it comes directly from God when it's written and translated and rewritten and retranslated and rewritten and stamped and then put into the King James English to kind of destroy the meaning of it. And
right.
I think you look at religion from the beginning, people have always tried to explain their existence here. I don't necessarily think that I wouldn't describe myself as an atheist. I would say I'm more of an agnostic. I believe there's some sort of spiritual connection that we have to each other or to oneself or to nature, but
right.
I don't necessarily think that there's like a dude named Jehovah and his son came down and like all of these things. And I don't know if I necessarily believe all of that. I think that's good. I'm okay with people being spiritual. I'm okay with people believing in God and Jesus and the thing. I think that part of it should be completely hyper individualistic, like we were talking about before.
Sure.
Like internalize that. I don't like people that like don't show up to my fucking door talking to me. Like
right.
Jehovah's Witness. Like get away from me, dude. Like I'm grown. I don't need you to tell me that I'm going to hell for doing certain things. I don't think I'm going to hell for eating meat on Friday. I don't think that just if it's so strict in that sense, like
I'm going to hell because I wore 2 different types of cloth today is what it comes down to.
I planted 2 different crops side by side, so I'm going to hell. Like,
man.
I mean, unless it's like, cocaine and a heroin plant, then maybe.
Maybe.
But if it's just for my own speedball, I should be fine, right?
Yeah. But that's that's really funny, dude. No, but like here's the thing though, man, is like, and I wonder about this, because so like you describe yourself as like agnostic or spiritual, but not an atheist, but definitely not a Christian.
No.
So did like the images of Jesus being white growing up, did that have anything to do with your not falling into Christianity?
So my mother is, or may she rest in peace, she was a Christian to the bone. My family is mostly Catholic. I even read some Bible verses when I was in New York just recently with my aunt and uncle, just because they're about that. And I'm totally okay with doing it because it's not like it's impeding me. They're not trying to pass it off. They were doing something. I was in the middle. I was like, oh, sure, I'll read it with you. Not a big deal to me. I don't make that big of a deal of it. I make a bigger deal of inaccuracies to fit the narrative of what you think is good and right. So you're saying that a black Jesus can't be black. He can Chris Rock said he can steal your car stereo, but he can't be your savior. So like, I feel that ignorance and that blatant just middle finger to what it says in the book that you so devoutly read. Like that book says it. Like if you believe every word in that book, there ain't no white people in that book.
Right.
There's none. Like
right.
Black skin and nobody was getting a tan. They weren't talking about a fucking tan. I mean,
could you imagine like Matthew and Mark both having like Irish accents, and then Luke and John being like I
Yeah,
don't
no, like,
like Welsh, like pikeys or something. Like read
bro,
the Bible, you know. I
they
don't.
were the people that were described in the Bible were of African origin.
Yeah.
The Jews left Egypt, Africa, and an arid climate in Africa. So there's lots of
Hmm.
fucking sun. So white people are getting burned to a crisp. You know, they migrated out of Egypt to the Mediterranean, where Arab people live now. Like
Yeah.
there wasn't white in that culture. So for the images of I think of the Last Supper, and I see just like a sea of white faces, and I think to myself, that is really inaccurate. The blonde hair, blue eyed Jesus looking like fucking Jethro Tull. Um, it's that's not who that is. Or actually, closer to Barry Gibbs. But anyway, staying alive ass. So so like you know. I just don't I couldn't get behind a religion that doesn't or any religion really because it does a couple things. One, it's historically inaccurate.
Right.
Two, it changes things based upon different sects. Like you're looking at Lutheran versus Catholic versus Presbyterian versus Seventh Day Adventist versus whomever. Like you're reading the same book, right? Like everybody's reading the same book, so it's all interpretations based upon what man. Same thing with the Muslim culture, Shia versus Sunni. You read out of the same book,
Right.
so what it is all the interpretation that you're a person you listen to, because this is all now generational, right? A
Right.
person that you listen to, a man
Right.
who is fallible, who
Yeah.
makes mistakes,
Right.
who is wrong, who has his own agendas, his
Right.
own needs to be filled. Made those certain constraints up that you can't do this, you can't do that. And Martin Luther with the 95 Theses. Not saying that he's wrong, because at that time you had plenary indulgences and all that garbage, and
Right. Right.
that's come on,
Right.
and then even then, Roman Catholics don't even fucking acknowledge that their priests are dirty fuckers. Like, how can
Right.
you get behind a religion that hides things like that? So therefore, I don't condone organized religion in that sense. I think that it's again, going back, I love Kevin Smith's movie Dogma, where
Right.
he describes, the Chris Rock again describing, it's great to have ideas, because ideas can be changed. Ideas, you can talk about ideas, we can share ideas, but to change a belief, to change someone's basic fundamental structure of who that they are and who they were brought up as, to change that is monumentally different and monumentally tougher.
Right.
So I've never, from a point, I would say about 16 or so, I've kind of held steadfast to that belief of, it's okay to be spiritual. It's okay to like have that feeling of God, or the connections to your people, but to get behind a book and say that this book is the end all be all. You listen, you go by it, or you go to hell. If God is really that vindictive, God really needs you to do that, then how is he a God? How is that, or how are he or she a God?
Right. Right.
Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense, man. And
Right.
full disclosure, I have been an atheist since I was like 16 or 15 or so. And over the years, I started out as a very mad atheist, like mad at the hand that I was dealt in life. And, and eventually I just got to where I was kind of agnostic, in the sense where I didn't care to debate whether there was a God or not. And as I've gotten older, I'm happier in my status as an atheist, but I'm able to engage with theology to a certain degree now, not being
Right.
attached like dogmatically to, stuff like that. But and I asked you about the religion thing and about maybe the face of Jesus being white might have had an impact on whether or not you fell into Christianity. And on my end, being, I had the Mexican side of the family that was Catholic, and I had my white father's side of the family that was Protestant. So I had the CCD shit and going to First Communion and stuff in the Catholic world.
Right.
And right as I was done, like battling that side of the family of like resisting going there, then like my white father got saved by some preacher, and I was thrown into like the Southern Baptist world, and so I was saved in that world, and I was baptized there too. And I kind of I got to see both sides of why Christianity sucks, right? The Protestant and Catholic side. But then I also understood that like once my dad like saved his brother and their family, and Christianity like a virus swept through my father's side of the family, I they would sit around and read the Bible, but it was like this. They were trying to figure out if all the Catholics were going to hell, and they were just trying to prove it. Like literally,
Right.
that was the conversation they were having, which was like, oh, so this verse here means that the Catholics are going to hell. Oh well, all right, that's great. And so all at once I rejected all of that, and I've always looked for some sort of, because there's like a sort of monopoly on morality that religion has in some ways. Like the
Right.
Bible tells you how to operate, what to do, how to how you should live. So like philosophically it answers the question like how should one live, how should one act. And so I've had to search through philosophy for some sort of moral anchor, to sort of to relieve some of the thrownness of being thrown into this existence, to relieve some of the, because I made a decision very young to be not anti-spiritual, but as far as my individual self, I would be anti-spiritual. I would be completely rejecting of any spirituality.
Right.
And I still hold that now. But as a consequence, I've spent most of my adult life trying to read different philosophers, not that I didn't have a sense of morality for myself, but that I wanted some sort of anchoring, as I can articulate now, some sort of anchoring in this thrownness of being a person that doesn't know where they came from, where they're going, or why they're here in this existence,
Right.
So, so as a person that is spiritual, but yourself spiritual, but not an atheist, but maybe agnostic, but definitely not Christian. Where in life have you found this sort of, how did you make up your own moral doctrine, I suppose?
So I would say a lot of my morality kind of comes from my upbringing.
Right.
I would say that, and it's funny because I was brought up by so-called spiritual people. Both my grandmother and my mother, spiritual people. But a lot of my morality exists from them. But I found that, again, just understanding, like you said, like philosophy and understanding that, whether whether there is a God or there isn't a God, our existence is finite. What matters is how we treat others, and realizing that our existence exists in the memories of others, so
Yeah.
like I always try to look at it like I don't want anybody to remember me being this person, being this bad person, being this guy who took advantage of people, being this guy who was a piece of shit.
Mm.
I want them to have fond memories of me because that matters to me. Because it matters to me. Well, the close people, like other people, But for the most part, like that's part of it, and just being it's almost one, it's self-driven as well. Like I find that it's almost selfish in a sense. I find that like if I'm good to someone else, I get a good feeling from it.
Right.
If I treat someone well, and I, you know, for instance, like if I do any kind of like volunteer work, um it's selfish. It's selfish in a good way. Like I am helping someone not for the fact of like just helping that person and making that person feel good, but the fact that that person feels good boosts my dopamine. It gives me a boost. It makes me feel good. Um, but when I hurt someone or when I am mean to someone, and I am not perfect, I've had my instances, as
Hmm.
we all have. Um, I feel like that the opposite is true. You know, I don't feel good. I feel worse. I feel drawn down. I feel empty. I feel really like terrible. And sometimes it's even a physical manifestation of said feelings.
Right. Right.
Um, and that to me is part of that morality as well. There's this, you know. Again, you go back to the philosophy thing, the factor of like understanding your conscious thought and then your unconscious feeling towards certain things. And you know, you look at you know, me and you've had discussions, and we've had our fascinations with like crazy people of the past, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, like the Ted Bundys and the weirdos of the world, and I always found them fascinating because not because I like were like, oh yeah, they were cool. Like how
Yeah.
do you, how are you just void of any of that feeling? Like how do you hurt someone else in that manner and not just be like completely crushed by it?
Right.
Like if anything were to, if I were to do any of those things, I would not be able to function. In
I,
defense of myself, it's one thing. Like, you know, if like somebody came into my house and I had my gun, like you're kind of coming in and you're threatening myself, and more importantly, you're threatening my family. That is the only instance in which I can think of harming someone to that effect. Um,
right. And
but
just to,
just
you know,
God,
just not to shit on whiteness, but we're gonna shit on whiteness a little bit more. You know, fucking serial killers are predominantly white.
oh yeah,
Um,
no, they are,
you
they
know,
are.
it's like it reminds me of that I'm thinking of it. It's bringing up this quote from the Fire Next Time from James. It was like he said, or maybe it wasn't the Fire Next Time. It was just a quote that he had, but he was like, you know, during World War II, once everyone gained knowledge that the Holocaust had happened and that many people had suffered and died, he said he felt that white people were surprised that they could treat people that badly, and he had the feeling that there were a lot of black people that weren't surprised at all that white people could do that.
Right. Yeah. It's like, oh, you guys are surprised by this? Do you guys not remember? Do you guys not remember slavery? Do you guys not
Right,
remember that?
right,
Do you not remember all that went down? Because we remember it. We remember it. Like, oh,
right.
what, you weren't there. You were never slaves. It's like, yeah, but you got to understand, like, the Holocaust is something that people will never forget, and that's the point, right? If you don't
It,
remember your history, you're doomed to repeat it.
it's
Like,
hard. It's hard to forget when it's like, why don't I have a grandmother or a grandfather, or what happened to your uncle or whatever? And it's like, oh well, you know, they lived in Poland during 1943, so they're gone. You know,
right. Yeah.
so yeah, and you know, you know, my girlfriend is a therapist, and so she does telehealth and reads quite a bit on psychotherapy and stuff. But you know, I have this whole other regard for trauma now than I've ever had in the past. Trauma being is something that actually on a sort of on a neurological level disrupts pathways and builds new pathways in maybe unhealthy ways, you know, whenever you experience trauma, and that sort of thing is generational as well.
Right. Yeah.
So, you know, in terms of, oh, well, you weren't ever a slave. It's like, well, you know, you've got generational trauma. to deal with, though. And I'm sure it's the same for Jewish people as well. But so that generational trauma is something that, like, I don't think that many white people understand or incorporate into their view of race in America. They don't understand that sort of stuff is carried over generations to where by the time you interact with this person, there's just physically exhausted from everything else on top of the generational trauma. They're exhausted from the re-traumatization that happens day in, day out. And which brings me to maybe the last question, man, is the conversation of reparations. I read somewhere once, and it made the most sense in the world to me at that point, where they said, part of reparations has to be rest for Black people, because on average they sleep about an hour less a night, apparently, and I could really understand why, with everything they carry with them in terms of how this world has treated them, and and not made room for them, and just on the psychological level, going to like Frantz Fanon talking about like the sort of the self-hatred that's imposed on colonized people when they're given an example of a race to assimilate into, and the closer you get to that race, the more harshly you're received anyway, because the colonizer does not want the colonized to look like them or act like them in actuality, in reality. But
yeah,
that's
it's all about service
right,
to
right,
service to the master race, essentially.
right,
And like, and then in that term, like it's true,
right. So I so I want to ask you what you think about the reparations conversation, and if that's something that should like be a bigger political topic. And I know that's a loaded question and stuff to that end, but I'll turn it over to you by saying that, like, Ice Cube recently came out, and he's been reading a book called Modern Money Theory, or Modern Money Mechanics, talking about like the fiat currency and how we could just print trillions of dollars. So why not do that, basically?
Right.
But what are your thoughts on reparations?
So, full disclosure, I had this conversation like for a significant amount of time with my wife.
No shit. Okay.
Thoughts of reparations. I have a double-edged feeling towards reparations. Everyone wanted the 50 acres and a mule, right? That's what you're supposed to get.
Which, by the way, the 50 acres and a mule, the fucking mule can't reproduce, so that's another dead end they were offering you.
Right, exactly. You get 50 acres and a few years, a few years of plowing before you have to go and buy another mule, and you better hope your crops grow, and you better hope none of the clansmen come up and burn crosses on your front yard, or try to pull you out and drag you, and try to murder you and your whole family. And so you have a huge amount of things to work for there. So I think reparations. I think reparations would work in a utopian existence. Like if everybody was just wiped completely of racism and it didn't exist, I think it would work. I don't know how reparations would work in our society now. I think it would cause far more civil discord than already exists. So it puts targets on the back of Black people, even more so. My wife is like, well, no, like reparations should happen. Black people have been through X, Y, and Z, and so on and so forth. And I'm like, yeah, I completely agree. And I was like, if I could get the money if I could get the what I believe that I'm owed as a Black person who's been, redlined and segregated and suppressed and all of these things throughout the existence of my people going back for as long as I can remember, up into including myself. And it wouldn't alleviate my stress. It would only add to it. Because the money that I would receive, or the land I would receive, or however the reparations would work, would be met by anger, frustration, and that feeling of, well, he's getting something for not doing anything, and I don't like that. And that's not the American way.
It's white lash.
So,
Yeah, man. Just
so
nothing
does
pisses
that,
off. Yeah, nothing pisses off white people more than oh, he got something that for free.
right? This is funny. The Republicans, they equate your worth based upon the amount of hours that you work, not necessarily how much you make, but the hours that you work, up until an extent, and then all of a sudden it becomes how much you make, because it's like, well, if that's the case, then Donald Trump will be worth nothing, because the guy that was handed millions of dollars and that he'd never had to work for. The guy's got perfectly manicured hands.
Right.
Probably not a single scar on his hands. I'm looking at scars from dropping fucking from cases, and fucking I got freaking I got rheumatoid arthritis, and I got carpal tunnel from wrapping freaking 2-aught feeder.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I worked my ass off.
Yeah.
But I look at somebody like that, and then how do you as a working person associate with that? So going back to the reparations thing, I don't see it working. Would it be good? Would it be something that I think would be great? Yeah, but the reverse side of that is far worse than I can ever think. They're going to be looking at, well, you're taking from me,
right,
to give to you.
Yeah.
Like, I don't pay taxes. I live in fucking Illinois. I own my house. I pay some of the highest fucking property taxes in the goddamn country.
Right.
So I'm just giving back to myself. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, like it would cause a shitstorm. And then I just look at it and I say, there's some other things that we can do, some social programs that we can put in place. The biggest thing for Black culture right now, and we go back to this, like, well, most of serial killers have been white. Most black people shoot or kill another black person over money. Or not, or lack thereof, more accurately, not having enough. So you have something that I want, I need it to live, so I'm going after it to get it from you.
Right.
Which is more of a pure, it's a survival instinct, as well as, like, well, this is my clique, that's your clique. We get money together to feed our families in this clique. We get money to feed our families in this clique. Well, I don't like you. You're crossing a line, like an army would, or another country would, and an army would intervene, right? A military would intervene. So that's kind of how they treat each other out in the streets. Like, I live in Chicago. I live outside of Chicago, and thank God I'm so far away from that. That's never been an issue. But and I don't ever foresee it being an issue. It's too country out here.
Right.
But you look at that and you say, what's the reason? What's the reason they're doing this? It's this economic turmoil, right?
Right.
Where's the education opportunities? Where are the opportunities for them to come up? They get money, and they get money and they spend it on shoes and da 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 da. Well, there's the opportunity lacking. You're going to sit there and tell me that a Southside kid, Chicago, has the same socioeconomic, educational opportunities that a white kid in Montauk has? You're inherently wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong.
There's a there's a line that a guy in a podcast says I listen to. African liberation media is something I take in every now and then, and he says it is the psychodynamics of black annihilation in service of white domination. And you bring up that most black people shoot other black people or murder other black people, what have you. But most white people shoot other white people, man. And
Yeah,
we
no,
don't.
it's like I was saying, like it's that difference of why. Why are they doing it? Do you think they're just out there doing it to do it? It's not that case. It's the case of it's culturally based of the fact that 95% of those murders, I'm telling you, are because of money, are simple, and not money to be like, yo, I'm out there spending, I'm balling. A lot of it's just like, yo, I need money to get bread and milk for my fucking kids, have a place to
fucking
sleep.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not that like, the so-called flashiness of black culture and everything. And it's like, a lot of that is a facade in a sense. I know a lot of those guys, and I know like that culture. It's a lot of them just want the same shit that everyone else wants, and that's so glorified in the media, where it's or overshown, not overglorified, but overshown in the media, where it's like, oh well, this gang and this gang and this it's like 95% of black people just want to be left the fuck alone. They want to do their thing. They want to be able to make money. They want to be able to feed their family. They want to be able to own their home. They want to be able to go and get a car on some credit, make fucking payments. They want to be left alone like everyone else does. Like, they want to just be able to enjoy their time. Like, why are you calling the cops on them? Then they're having a fucking barbecue in the park, leaving.
Right.
Like, it's a matter of the economic standards being so terrible that people have to resort to violence in order to just survive. And that's what it is. There's such a surplus in this country. We talk about the 1%ers. Like, why is there such a huge gap between you or myself who are middle class?
Right.
Why is there a huge gap between us and the bottom of the 1%? Like, massive gap. Like, to where we can live 15, 20, 30 lifetimes making maybe even more of what we make now and still not get there.
I think
it's like, well, they worked really hard. No.
Yeah.
No,
of course they exploited people very well. But also the wealth extraction of white history has come home to extract the wealth from American whiteness at this point. We see our militarism returning to our shores in the form of militarized police and school police, getting all the extras that the military doesn't need right away, right? So the police gets it, and then all of a sudden we're in this surveillance state, police state. The imperialism has returned to our shores, right? And in the same way, maybe whiteness has traveled the globe, raping and pillaging and genociding for a goddamn jar of spices. And then all of a sudden, this wealth extraction that they've done to everybody else has finally happened to whiteness, at least in America. Right. So in that regard, I don't know that like many people draw those same parallels, but I think that there's historical patterns there, and I also feel that it's unsustainable, like in a very Marxist sort of way, like. Ultimately, history comes down to one group of people imposing their will over another group of people, and all of history being class war. We are reaching a critical point within our country where some sort of shift has to happen, or that's just what's going to happen. Some shift's going to happen. It's going to happen. I don't think there is an or about it, really. So, all right. So last thing, we'll wrap up here, man. And this is kind of a poignant question, man, because very early on in our discussion, I talked about briefly how, or I might have made mention of how I'm terrified of becoming a father, terrified of,
Yes.
like it just scares the holy shit out of me. And part of that is like, because my mother had me when she was 16. So, and being a Mexican or half Mexican, I should have a fucking litter of kids at this point. I don't have any, you know? so I've always been careful about that, as it was like a thing. Like I didn't want to, I don't know, being selfish in my pursuits. I was like, I don't want to ruin my own chances of achieving whatever it is I want to set out to do. So I'm 37 now, man. At some point, I'll probably, if I'm gonna have a kid, it'll probably be at some point coming up soon. And this country being what it is, it doesn't seem like a conducive place to even have a kid. Like, I mean, if I had a kid right now and it was 2020 and things got progressively worse till like 2036, and that kid was 16 years old, if I was that kid, I'd look at me and be like, "You mean it was 2020 and you thought it was a good idea to fucking bring me into this place?" Like,
Yeah.
so I know that you're a relatively new father of a couple of years now, and your kid's he's turning 2 soon, and I'm wondering, based upon your lived experience and the things that we've talked about, and the social injustices and systemic racism and all of those things, man. Do you have any fears for your kid, and if so, I mean, what fears do you have for their not only like formative years in their childhood of growing up and psychologically developing, but also like fears for their, for their emerging consciousness as they get older and they're growing up in a country that is in such pitiful condition as ours is right now?
Well, between you and I, the wife and I have already decided, we have the financial means, as it stands right now, to move out of the country.
Where are you going?
If Trump wins, we are really looking at trying to buy some property in Canada and getting the fuck out of here. And I'm not even joking.
Shit. Yeah.
People always say to black people, "You don't like it, leave, motherfucker." We finally have the financial means. I will keep this house as a rental to pay for my shit. I have another house that's going to be rented that will pay for our shit.
Right.
My wife
Yeah,
my wife can work remotely. My company exists in Canada, and I can work remotely for a lot of the stuff I do.
Wow. Peace.
So
Yeah.
that's something that we're, honestly, we're like 80-20 on that. 80-20 going, if he wins. I would even say 90-10 if he wins, we're gone. So bringing our kid into this country in this state, in the state that it's in, is just, it's something that I could foresee, like my generations before me having to deal with civil rights and how tumultuous it was at that time. It's so unprecedented, the amount of hate that exists, and it's something that I look at my son. And my son can pass for kind of white, but you see the ethnicity in him, especially in the hair.
Right.
Fucking handsome kid. Come on, he's a beautiful kid.
Right.
But it's the same things that when I spoke about my father before getting mad at me for not bringing my ID out of the house. Like, it's something that I have to have those discussions. My father has had those discussions with me before. Being a black guy, you got to be, cops pull you over, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Shut up, because they will shoot you. Shut up. You say these things. Why am I being pulled over? Am I being detained, or am I free to go?
Yeah.
And they start asking questions, I don't want to talk about my day.
Right.
And if they say they're going to place you under arrest, I plead the Fifth Amendment, and worry about that shit in court. Don't fucking get caught, because they will fucking pull you out. They will beat you. Record yourself. You have this phone. Turn that fucking thing on. Turn it on. Record every goddamn thing.
Wow, man.
Record everything. Turn it on yourself. Turn it on yourself and record. Make sure you follow those strict rules. Shut the fuck up.
Do you have one of those like one of those apps that like you open the app and you say I'm being pulled over and the phone like turns off its screen but stays recording, or any of those apps going on? Or do you just...
No, I don't think I do. I don't think I have that app. If I did, I haven't used it in a while. I legit just anytime me and my wife have this thing. If I get pulled over from now on, I just call her.
Gotcha.
I just call her and I just say, hey, I'm getting pulled over. This is where I'm at. This is what's happening. And I just leave the phone on. And if I'm in an area where I can't do any of that, I'm just gonna record. And then just shut the fuck up. Like, I know it's tyranny. I know it's tyranny, but if you fight against tyranny in that sense without somebody else with you, you're going to die in that situation.
Yeah, you can't fight the system alone. You can't fucking take on a cop by yourself. And I hear what you're saying, man. And it's so shitty, man, to hear that from you as one of my best friends in the world, because I grew up underneath the cop and I know that cop psychology, so I'm a leftist in terms of politics, man. I'm identify as a communist, and I hate cops, and I believe all cops are bastards, and that's a whole other conversation we could have at a certain point. But but I have seen growing up firsthand how these cops, or at least the cop that raised me, man, was just chomping at the bit to pull people over, to harass people, to put people in jail. He was, longing and desiring and pining for confrontation, and I saw how he specifically wanted to go after Mexicans, really, and so I the thought of like the person that my father is pulling you over scares the shit out of me.
Yeah. That's, and that being said, like, that is for real my reality. That is our reality as Black people, that we are targeted, even if not all cops are doing it. And again, like, I am totally for reappropriating a lot of the funding, because I don't want to say defund, because I think defund leaves it too blanketed.
Yeah.
I want to reappropriate the funding to more social programs to deal with certain things. Like, why are you sending a cop to stop somebody who's fucking jaywalking when they have a gun? Why?
Yeah. It's just take the situation that could be resolved amicably and add a firearm to it and some sort of abnormal psychology, and that's basically what you get.
The lack of training with a lot of police officers. These guys are thrown into situations, and it's like, some of these guys don't have the fucking mentality to deal with that, man. I was a bouncer for years, and the amount of confrontations that I've had to be in, like, now, like, my mentality has changed. Like, I don't want to fucking even be near a confrontation right now. Back then, I was like, yeah, gung ho, yeah, strong,
right,
yeah, oh, swing, boom, this guy's gonna knock him the fuck out. Like, that's how a lot of these guys are. Like, they're very like, and then you get the gang mentality, where it's like, well, I got the badge, and I'm a part of a brotherhood, and Blue Lives Matter, and it's like, dude, it's a job.
Man, there's also job. It's a job, but it's also like, there was a government study, which, if anybody wants that, I will send you an email with that PDF. But there was a government study done in the 90s that literally a U.S. funded study that determined that 40% of cops beat their wives. Like 40% of cops, are domestically violent themselves. and you can make all sorts of judgments of, or, you know, arguments to like, maybe it's the job which contributes to that sort of abnormal psychology and those acts of violence. But there has to be something within a person, I think, to sort of like sign up to eagerly enforce, you know, laws with violence. You know, I think they're already predisposed to that sort of thing before that. But man, you know, I saw, you know, during my childhood, I saw my father be domestically violent with my mother in different ways. And you know, it's going back to your whole thing about, and I didn't say this at the time, but when you were talking about driving by the courthouse in a suit and tie, and then a cop pulls you over, right? That was like one of the jokes that my father used to say growing up was like, "What do you call a black man in a suit?" He's like, "The defendant," you know. And
Right. Right.
and so this sort of like had to deprogram a lot of this shit growing up, and because of the way that I was raised, and having to sort of refuse a lot of and deprogram a lot of that stuff. But to hear you speak about this stuff, it's, you know, I have to say, man, I think of you a lot, man. When I watch the news, anytime, like when I saw the George Floyd video, you were the first person I thought about. And you know, when the Jacob Blake video, you know, anytime really, because I mean, you're near and dear to my heart, man. So I think of you, and then as I continue trying to increase my social consciousness and learn more and engage more with theory, you know, the like the prose of James Baldwin, when it talks about, you know, when he talks about his father scolding him for thinking that he could do anything that a white kid could, and he was bound and determined to do it. Like the fear that was heard in his father's voice as his father scolded him then is what I think of you and your son, and these sort of really sad truths of our existence in this time. And I also, you know, long for like a country where race doesn't play such a central, pivotal, uh, primary role in our social discourse. You know, like if this country did not have a sordid history with slavery and with Jim Crow and Reconstruction and segregation and all of that, it could be something that we wouldn't have to have discussions about. Possibly, if we didn't have that history, you know, it could be something to where we could, in a liberal sense, coexist.
Right.
But these are things that need to be spoken of, and these conversations need to be had. And I'm hoping that for whoever listens to this conversation, maybe if they weren't already there, maybe this can push them closer to where they need to be in terms of understanding the racial struggles that people go about in this country, that they perhaps will never experience themselves, and they're fortunate for it and privileged, but not to react with like the politics of self-exoneration, but to understand that all of us are complicit in this, and we need to work on this, but we're not obligated to finish the work, but neither are we obliged to abandon it either.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I 100% agree with that. I think, you know, it's crazy how long it's taken this country to even get to this point, and it's maddening how much further we still have to go. And I think that's the part that plagues me every day is being from both white and black lineage. The amount of racism that existed in my own family, it's we've come so far, but we still have so far to go. And I feel like the last couple years, especially, we've kind of taken a big digression, just because of who's speaking now. Now, I don't know if it necessarily means that these people came out of nowhere. because I don't think that was the case.
No,
But I
no,
think
yeah.
their voice has been magnified. I should say amplified. Being an audio engineer, their voice has been amplified based upon the politics of today, and it's going to take time. It's going to take time. There's a lot of healing. There's a lot of damage. And come November 3rd, we're going to see. We're going to see what the hell is going to. Is it November 3rd? Yeah, it is November 3rd.
It is November 3rd. Yeah, yeah.
I look at that election and I say, Jesus, man. I say it's going to be bad no matter what. It's going to be bad. There's going to be some shit. We're dealing with some stuff back in New York. So we've been back and forth in New York over the last month and a half. And we're going back again this week.
Yeah.
And my wife says to me, she goes, no matter what the hell happens, we are back in Illinois. We are back home by the election, no matter what. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know where this is all going. And I'm like, she's not exaggerating. It's really these kind of times where people are going to lash out because of politicians, because of not even a politician, because of a clown.
Right.
Honestly, I mean, there used to be a time with my friends where they didn't align with me politically, but it would just be a conversation that would last 5 minutes and then it'd be over.
Right.
Now it's I can't really be around you because what you believe and what you support, it's against my existence. It's against who I am as a human being. I don't want that around me. I don't want that a part of my life. I need that to be separate from who I am because that threatens not only my existence but the existence of my son. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I couldn't even imagine, like, if I came to you and I was like a Trump supporter at this point, you would have every right to fucking shut me out of your life, man. Because any I if you look at old presidential debates like with George Bush and Reagan or what have you, it's like they speak of immigration like they're both Democrats. Everyone's civil and things are fine,
Yep.
And over the years, this sort of it's just become more and more overt. It's not even like Southern strategy masking the language and dog whistles. It's just obvious and surface level and right in front of your face at this point. And it's become unignorable to the point where, it's tearing apart families. People are losing friends. And, I just don't think there's any room for civility in a lot of ways. Like I could argue with you about pizza toppings, and I don't even care what fucking pizza toppings you're talking about. Like we could have a conversation about whether or not you want to put like grilled grasshoppers on a pizza pie or something, and it's
right.
If you advocated that position, it would be tenable, and I maybe would think you're a little weird, but I wouldn't think you wanted my existence to stop,
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's funny how all of the conversations that people have nowadays, social media is such a garbage heap of just negative feelings and negative emotions, and you just look at it and it goes, well, you're talking about the pizza toppings. How does a conversation about the pizza toppings turn into, well, you're fucking liberal? And it's just
yeah.
Where did that come from? Like, why does every conversation now turn into, a conversation about something like that turn into a conversation about fucking being a Democrat or a Republican? It's being a liberal or a conservative.
Right.
Being Antifa, like that bothers me. It's like, well, Antifa this, and I'm like, do you guys realize that Antifa is just an ideal? It's not an actual, like, it's not a group, guys.
It's been around since the 30s, man.
Well, the whole country of the whole fucking United States was Antifa for 6 years, guys.
Right. Yeah. Let's talk about pizza for a second, because I was I think it's I listened to this this John Rawls book, The Theory of Justice, was there's like a metaphor for what he was describing, was that like if we ordered a pizza and it wasn't sliced, right? And then we had a certain amount of people here and we had to give them all a slice, and one person was in charge of slicing the pizza up, but that person didn't know which slice they were going to receive, then in theory that person would slice up this pizza in a way that would, any slice that they would receive, they would be happy to receive it, basically,
Right.
And so that's kind of the idea of like socialism, and like in that, not it's not that we don't have any winners, it's just that we don't have anyone that loses.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that led me, like, as I was falling asleep last night, I was thinking about this, and I thought about it. It was kind of a thought experiment I was running through my head about the fragility of electoral politics. Because no matter which way they vote, right, they can always push it one way or the other and overturn it. We saw it in Florida with like the Dole and Bush election in, like, was it 2004-ish or something?
Dole and Bush.
Was it Dole and Bush? Sorry, Gore and Bush.
Yeah, it was Gore and Bush in 2000. Yeah, but Dole and Clinton in
Dole and
96.
Clinton in 96. But
Yeah.
there was like a Florida thing that Roger Stone had a hand in, where they just like announced the winner before it was, and then everybody just ran with it. Like they stole that election,
Right.
And then we see the Electoral College, how that turns over popular votes, right? And we also have this sort of, Russian interference thing, a new kind of Red Scare going on that way. And all of this, and I just the faith I had in electoral politics is just not there anymore. So going back to this pizza, it was like this thought experiment in my head as I was falling asleep about, let's say, like, we had a pizza party, there's 5 people here, and somebody invites some dude, and so he's a 6th person, and everybody wants like different pizzas, and he's like, no, I only want grilled grasshoppers on my pizza, or something, or I only want anchovies, and nobody else likes anchovies, or something. So he's like, okay, you can order the pizza, you can order your black olives and your pepperoni. When it gets here, I'm gonna throw that shit in the fucking yard, and then I'm gonna call the pizza place back and tell them to bring us anchovy pizzas. It's like, no, well, maybe we can just, he's like, no matter what you do, it's like, if I want anchovies on my pizza, I can have anchovies. I'm going to get them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call the pizza place right after you're done, and I'm going to cancel your order, and then I'm going to put in a new order for all anchovy pizzas. It's like these sort of like outside the realm of normal thinking things that can happen to enforce a particular type of pizza. And it was, maybe that's a weird thought experiment or something, but I just thought of an absolute, like, incorrigible child, like stomping on pizza to get the anchovy pizza, or a conniving young child calling. Basically, we have a child in the White House, so maybe he's like connives and is just a fucking asshole and calls and cancels your pizza order and puts in a new order instead, sort of thing.
Yeah, Mr. Regeneron. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, it's an all my way or nothing ideal. That there's no compromise. There's a reason why he's not a part of New York State anymore, because nobody fucking trusts him. There's a reason why he's turning a blind eye to everything Russia has done. The Russian bounties, the fucking the fact that they interfered in the election, because it turned out good for him. And he owes money to Putin. Like, that has to be the case. Like, you look at the Russian banks and the Russian economy, like, Putin backs a lot of that shit.
Right.
So, somebody's giving me money. Am I gonna say, am I gonna fuck with them so they can stop giving me money? No, like, I just shut the fuck up, or I owe them money, or whatever the situation is. But it's just a matter of like this whole. I'm on my side of the fence, and my side of the fence is right, and what you're saying, no matter what you say, is wrong. That whole ideal, like, is fucked up, because there are some certain things that are completely wrong. racism.
Yeah.
No matter how you slice it, it's wrong. Sorry.
Yeah.
You know, you want to sit there and be racist? Like, okay, yeah, that's your prerogative, but you're wrong.
Sure.
But you know, whether or not, like, you know, pro-choice, pro-life, you know, like, who's wrong? Who's 100% wrong here?
Right.
You know what I mean? But doesn't matter, because whatever side that particular person is on, you're wrong. In any circumstance, woman gets raped, she's wrong. Woman has to make a medical decision. A terrible Pete Buttigieg said it the best.
Right. Yeah.
You know, when he talked about that situation, in that situation, it's like, how many of these people are going to third term pregnancy, picking out shit, painting the baby's room, getting the crib, and then just, you know, waking up one day just like, I'm gonna kill it.
Right.
Nobody's doing that.
But it's also like,
the doctor's like, you have to abort the baby, you're gonna die.
Yeah. Well, I also think this whole notion of like, oh, you know, liberals want to murder toddlers or whatever the fuck, you know, like, I think it's, you know, it's also like, it's an attempt at dehumanization.
Yes.
You know, and I think that, you know, I mean, that also goes back to like whiteness in a way. It's like, it's a lot easier to kill brown people when you don't see them as people, you know, and it's a lot easier to subjugate women when you don't see them as people, but you perceive them as objects. Which exactly, like, what else is a psychopath other than a person that doesn't see people as people, but sees them as objects to manipulate, you know?
Yeah. No, and that's 100% who he is. He is a sociopath. He's a psychopath. And he's, you know, I mean, Jesus, man, like, the amount of people that just follow this guy, and it's not even that they follow him. That like, I have a few friends that I know are Trump voters, but they don't they don't say shit. Like, they avoid political discussions altogether.
Right.
And I'm just like, all right, like, I wish you'd speak up and say something, but at the same time, like, you're not trying to fucking be all up in my face with like Trump. Right. But people nowadays are like it's getting scary to the almost like the idolation of like who this person is, and it's just like you realize like he's human trash.
Yeah, it's very Jim Jones, man.
I'd say, dude, the Kool-Aid is thick, bro. It's got a lot of sugar in that motherfucker, bro. It's got a lot of sugar, dude.
Well, that's it for episode 8 and part 2 of my conversation with Samuel Thomas. As always, if you'd like to send any comments, concerns, criticisms, or vitriol my way, you can send them to the show email at noeasyanswerspodcast@gmail.com. Support for No Easy Answers comes from listeners just like you. And so if you have not done so already, please consider becoming a supporter of No Easy Answers at www.anchor.fm/No Easy Answers and click the support button. We couldn't do it without you. So until next time, take care, all my guys, gals, and non-binary pals.